So, lots to talk about. Let's get to it. First of all, let's talk about your thoughts and response on the benefit to the families, because this kind of popped up when Representative Tom Miles brought this forth. Tell me a little bit about the origin of this and where we are now.
Well, Mississippi's had a line of duty death benefit fund for law enforcement and first responders for quite some time now. And in 2016, it was some language was added to the bill that dealt with the cause of death, and it specifically mentioned federal statutes, the Public Safety Officers Benefit Act of 1976 and the Hometown Heroes Survivors Act of 2003, which was amended following 9/11, and basically made it in Mississippi so that our funding and benefits to survivors of a law enforcement or first responder that died in the line of duty would mirror federal law. And so at that time, those were the two acts that were referenced. Yeah. And so that passed in 2016. Last year, in August of 2020, Congress came together and President Trump signed into law the Safeguarding America's First Responders Act of 2020. Which amended the federal statute to also include, for a 2-year period, 2020 and 2021, any officers that died of COVID. It would be presumed that was a death in the line of duty. And so that was a new law that was enacted.
They would be grandfathered in?
Yeah, they would be grandfathered in. And so they'll get the federal death benefit fund under the federal law, which is about $370,000. Mm-hmm. It's $100,000, the Mississippi Death Benefit Fund. The problem that I've seen with the law is that it does not reference the new act, and that's something that I felt the Mississippi legislature need to take up and consider, because the reality is, and we did the averages, it's about 4 or 5 deaths a year, line of duty, that we've had to pay out on average.
Is this firefighters also? Or
it's firefighters, first responders, so your EMTs as well as law enforcement. But yeah, so it's been about an average of 5 a year, and of course, if we're going to include the COVID deaths and make a presumption that it was in fact line of duty, because that's the key. When somebody dies of COVID, it's really hard to trace exactly where they got it, and so we're trying to get that presumption established so that it's presumed that it was in the line of duty.
So the presumption itself, if that is in the law, negates any challenge, basically, to that.
That's right. That's right. And it takes the burden off the Department of Public Safety to have to determine, well, did they get it at work? No. Did they get it picking up their kids at school? Did they, get it at the grocery store? So when you have that presumption, it gives us the ability under the law to go ahead and pay those. Does
it matter or not if that first responder had a vaccine or not?
It does not matter. That's not part of the federal law. Of course, when it was passed, I think the vaccines hadn't quite come out yet. Mm-hmm. And so who knows what the feds might do with it going forward. And that certainly is something that, I think Mississippi will want to look at, is how the feds amend their law. And if we want to adopt the same standards they adopt, then, we can do that, or we can keep taking a look at it individually. And I get the sheriff's frustrations and some of the law enforcement leadership in that they feel like these claims should be paid. And I do too, but I also want to do it within the parameters of the law. Mm-hmm. And I want to set really good policy, not one in which I'm just unilaterally, or a future commissioner is unilaterally making exceptions. And so I do feel that, we can do this, and the legislature can take it up, and that's the appropriate way to handle it. And we'll see what they come back with.
What happens between now and then? I mean, you have funeral expenses, et cetera, et cetera. What happens to those families between now and then?
Well, again, I would mention under the federal death benefit fund, they're
taking care of
that's $370,000 plus MEMA for anybody in the state of Mississippi that dies of a COVID-related death. Mm-hmm. MEMA has a grant that's put on by the feds that will pay up to $6,000 in funeral expenses. So that can be applied for through MEMA to help cover that. And, early on, we recognized this was an issue. I started talking with legislators about it back in April. Mm-hmm. Of course, Mississippi legislative session is one built by deadlines, and if you don't get a bill in by the beginning of the session, it's kind of hard to get it in later. And so It's something that we've been working towards for next year. I've met with the lieutenant governor, met with the speaker, met with the governor about these issues, and we've been, trying to formulate some different ideas and responses to it.
I would think, Commissioner, that this would be one of those things that it's not that controversial, and that if there happens to be a special session, you probably could do some house cleaning with that quickly.
I would hope so, and the reality is we have a number of funds that have come down from the federal government to the state, and like I said, on average, we've paid out about $500,000 a year. If we make this change, I know just without having applications that have actually come in for these benefits, we've only turned down 2. You're probably looking to upwards of 30, and so I think the question is, if you do this, how long does it go on?
Yeah.
Because it could be a large expense in the future going forward, and then also making sure that it is narrowly construed, because this is an infectious disease. Do you want that to spill over into folks getting the flu or pneumonia or other diseases that result in death? So I think it has to be narrowly construed to COVID. And the reality is that's what the feds did. And other states have taken the same action legislatively. They've amended their laws to provide these death benefit funds in the same way.
So I would guess that the health department had to officially sign off the death certificate as COVID as a cause.
I think that's right. I think there would have to be some sort of link to that.
How's our force look as far as Highway Patrol? Are they full force now, or do we still have some people in quarantine? Or
the numbers are going down. Like everybody, they were spiking for a little while, but we looked at the numbers yesterday and they're down. We've been at about 520 troopers, and hoping to get that number up to 600. And so our big legislative push this year, my really one big thing on my agenda, other than getting this law amended, has been getting the salaries for state law enforcement officers at the Department of Public Safety up to